The storm outside had barely calmed when Richard Hale, a millionaire single father known for his strict routines, walked into his silent mansion earlier than usual. The polished marble floors reflected the soft chandelier lights, but something else caught his attention, an odd rustling sound coming from the kitchen. As he stepped closer, the scene froze him in place. There next to the stainless steel trash bin, the young maid, Alina, still in her uniform with gloves on, was crouched low, trembling as she hurriedly lifted the bin lid. Her eyes were red, her hands shaking, and in her fingers was a half-eaten piece of chicken she had pulled from the trash. She held it like someone who hadn't tasted real food in days. Her face showed shame, fear, and desperation all at once. And for the first time in years, Richard felt something hit his chest like a punch. This wasn't just hunger. This was survival. If you believe kindness can change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul Tale. Your support helps us spread more powerful stories like this. Richard stood frozen, unable to move as Alina quickly wiped her eyes, stood up, and tried to hide the food behind her back. The mansion suddenly felt unbearably empty, not because of the space, but because of the pain that echoed from this moment. Richard wasn't used to seeing suffering so close. His wealth had shielded him from the quiet tragedies happening right under his roof. Alina had been working for him for just 3 weeks. She was quiet, hardworking, polite, always finishing tasks before anyone could notice her presence. He had assumed she was simply shy. But now, seeing her like this, kneeling next to discarded leftovers as if they were a feast, made him realize how deeply he had misjudged her situation. She wasn't quiet. She was broken. As the hours passed, Richard couldn't shake the image from his mind. Alina's thin hands, her breathless panic, the way she tried to apologize even without speaking. He remembered her signing her work contract, insisting she didn't need meals included, asking for long shifts, saying she preferred to stay busy. He had thought she was simply eager to work, maybe save money. Now he understood the truth. She couldn't afford her own food. She was sending every rupee she earned to someone else. But who and why? That night, after his 8-year-old daughter Lily went to sleep, Richard sat by the window, staring into the darkness. He had been cold lately, ever since his wife passed away 2 years earlier. Her laughter had once filled the mansion like sunlight, but her absence left thick shadows behind. He moved through life like a machine, providing, working, surviving, but never truly living. When Alina arrived, her gentle presence had brought a quiet warmth into the home, especially to Lily, who adored her. But Richard had kept his distance, afraid of letting anyone close again. Now he wondered how much pain he had failed to see simply because he never looked. Over the next few days, Richard began observing Alina more carefully. She always arrived early, sometimes even before dawn. Her clothes were worn, her shoes cracked at the edges, and she carried a small bag of belongings that looked painfully light. She worked tirelessly, often skipping breaks, barely drinking water. And every time Lily asked if she had eaten, Alina smiled and said she wasn't hungry. But her eyes told a different story. They held the kind of hunger that went beyond the stomach, hunger for stability, for peace, for life not constantly on the verge of falling apart. It wasn't until one rainy afternoon that everything became painfully clear. Richard found Alina standing outside the servants' entrance, drenched, shaking, speaking softly into a phone. Her voice was barely audible, but her words were sharp with worry. She was talking about medical bills, about someone who needed urgent treatment, about not having enough money for both food and medicine. She was pleading, apologizing, and promising to send more. When she hung up, she leaned against the wall and cried, not loud, but the kind of cry that comes from someone who has learned to stay silent even in pain. Richard stepped back before she could see him. His heart was heavy, the kind of heaviness he hadn't felt since losing his wife. Suddenly he realized something. Alina wasn't just trying to survive. She was trying to save someone she loved. And she had chosen hunger for herself so someone else could eat, so someone else could live. Later that evening, when Alina thought everyone was asleep, she returned to the kitchen. Richard watched from the doorway. She opened the trash bin again, slowly this time, not out of desperation but out of habit, her survival routine. But before she could reach for the leftovers, Richard stepped forward. Without a word, he closed the bin gently and placed a fresh plate of warm food on the counter. Alina froze, tears filling her eyes instantly. She tried to step back, shaking her head ashamed, but Richard didn't let her. Instead, he simply nodded, offering her the chair. She sat down slowly, like someone who hadn't been shown kindness in years, and the moment she took her first bite, she broke down, covering her face with her hands as she cried silently. From that day, everything began to change. Richard increased her salary without explanation. He added her to the staff meal plan, ensuring she would never go hungry again. He arranged transportation for her so she wouldn't walk long distances before and after work. And finally, one morning, with a soft, almost hesitant voice, he asked her who she had been sending all her money to. Alina revealed the truth. Her younger brother had cancer. Their parents had passed away, and she was the only one left to care for him. Treatment was expensive, survival uncertain, but she refused to give up on him. She had taken the maid job not because she wanted to clean wealthy homes, but because she had no other choice. Every rupee she sent home was a lifeline for her brother. Every meal she skipped was to pay for a medicine he couldn't live without. Richard felt his throat tighten. He knew what it meant to fear losing someone you love. He knew that pain far too well. From that moment, he began helping quietly, anonymous donations to the hospital, arranging better doctors, covering extra bills. Alina never knew where the sudden support came from, but she cried every time the hospital gave her good news. Lily noticed Alina smiling more, and for the first time in a long while, Richard smiled too. Months later, as spring sunlight filled the mansion, Alina received a call that made her collapse to her knees in relief. Her brother was finally cancer-free. He was weak, recovering, but alive. She wept into her hands as Richard and Lily rushed to her side. For once, those tears were not from hunger, fear, or hopelessness. They were tears of victory. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul Tale. Your support helps us spread more stories that remind the world of the power of compassion. Before the ending, tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you saw someone silently suffering like Alina? And with that, Alina's life changed forever. Kindness had found her at her lowest moment, and it lifted her higher than she ever believed possible. Richard learned that opening your heart doesn't weaken you, it heals you. And Lily gained not just a caretaker, but a gentle soul who became part of their family.